Toastmasters and my fellow colleagues, Barabbas only telling half-truths.
Good enough.
If it were not for people like Barabbas, we would not be able to achieve some of the things that we have achieved.
Wow.
He did not tell you that while we were in Jamaica,
You're right.
he was one of our leading drummers.
You're right.
And he created one of the drumming sounds that you're very familiar with. And you may not know this, but he's probably one of the most foremost drummers in the country. So, big up to the sheriff. And Michael Gibney. In a report entitled Cultural Development and Policy in the Commonwealth of the Bahamas, submitted by the Bahamas government, or submitted to the Bahamas government in 1987, D. Paul Schaefer wrote, like many countries in the world, the Commonwealth of the Bahamas has a long and distinguished history of cultural accomplishments. Over many centuries, Bahamian cultural life has received strong and dynamic contributions from the indigenous Indian people, the Amerindians that we talked about, the Africans and the Europeans, who chose to settle on the numerous islands which in combination make up this jewel of the Caribbean. During the period of time, an extremely vibrant heritage of songs, dances, stories, works of art, artifacts, monuments, and historic sites developed. This heritage now represents the legacy which connects all Bahamians with their rich cultural past. And we can stop right there. If you understood anything that I just said, we are a confluence or a creolization of various cultures. Because one time about, I don't remember how many years ago, but it was a female minister of education, so you understand.
Ivy Dumont. The only one.
And we approached her and asked the question, why is it that you do not teach African history in our schools? Her retort was, why would you want us to teach racism in our schools? So I said, is it racism when you teach European history in our schools? Is it racism when you teach American or Latin American history in our schools that we are all mandated to take? How is it that it will be racism for us to teach us about 85% of our ancestry? Stephen Dillard. Stephen Dillard, by the way, who was a Haitian.
Yes, sir.
Thanks.
Are we here? Are you listening?
Yes.
In 1804, Haiti was the first country to gain its independence in this region. Before 1807, what happened in 1807?
Abolition
No,
of slavery.
the abolition of the slave trade. Not of slavery, of the slave trade.
Children were freed first.
Of the slave trade.
Yes.
In 1807, after a 16-year-old girl in Crooked Island, poor Kate, she was 16 years old, on a plantation in Crooked Island, she was persecuted by her landmasters because she refused for them to continue to oppress her. So they put her in a stockade. And to keep her awake, they would rub pepper in her eyes. They would treat her so inhumanely that after about 3 or 4 weeks, she finally died. But that was the impetus for those in London to advocate for the abolition of the slave trade. There's so much that we need to talk about.
Yes.
In the 1800s, someone by the name of Pompey, anybody know that name?
Yes.
In Exuma.
Yes.
It was the first uprising in Bahamian history by a group of Africans. Pompey decided that they were not going to move them from the plantation in Exuma to Cat Island, where they wanted to move them. He said that this is where our home rule have given us heritage here. So anybody whose name is Roll, and you got land, Pompey decided that he was going to protest, and he would go and he would gather the warriors and defy those, and he stole a boat and he sailed that boat to Nassau to plead for the slaves there. Of course, they sent him back, they beat him, they abused him, and finally they killed him. Pompey Museum. You got to know your history. Yesterday, 3 young black Bahamians were arrested because they stood up for what they believed in, which is your constitutional right.
That's right. Block the road.
They blocked the roads with some vehicles because the vehicles just happened to break down in a certain place. And while they were there and they couldn't move, the demonstrators who were protesting against Sandals, which is the most racist company in the history of the Bahamas. If you see the way they treat our Bahamian people, the president of the union today is in doctor's hospital. You know why? Because an extinguisher exploded in the kitchen where she was working. Those fumes got into her lungs and in her respiratory system. And today, tonight, if I call her right now, she would tell you that she is, unless they released her within the last hour. As a result of those fumes in her respiratory system, she suffered seizures. Over the past weekend, she had 4 in succession. So they admitted her to the hospital. Wow. I am told now that she's having other medical complications. That company have yet to inquire about the health of this young man.
I cry shame on that.
There was a $1,500 medical testing bill that we requested that they will underwrite. They refused to do it. So I am demanding tonight that every red-blooded Bahamian call for the annihilation, the excommunication, the extradition of that particular establishment.
What's the name?
When they treat our people like slaves, so you can understand what I'm saying. And yes, I know those among us are going to say, oh, well, we're going to lose our jobs.
Yep.
But if you want to be a slave all of your life, for a slave master, well, let him go and we will run the hotel. If you give us the concessions that you give the bookstore, if you give us the concession that you give the Kursman, if you give us the concession that you give the Israelian, we can run the hotel better than this.
That's all right. That's okay. Our country is better. Less crime and everything. Our country will be better.
If Bahamians are going to own our country, we got to own our economy.
Yes.
That's right.
I celebrate this brother.
Yes.
I've been to this place, the chickens breed you. You know what chicken, they will race you. They run you down. I went then, the turkey. Listen, I rather be, there's an African proverb that says, If I go forward, I die. If I go backward, I die. I will go forward in dignity. So we got to send a message to Butch Joe.
Yes, sir.
We got to send a message to the powers that be that cloak him, whoever they are. Respective governments who cloak him and allow him to destroy our people. If you see the mold, that the conditions under which these people have to work, the rodents and the rats. I see you, man. So don't take my word for it. Go and see it for yourself. So let me come back. You see, we have to at some point take the bend out of your back and stand up and be men and women in our country and stop selling our souls for a few jobs. So the late E. Clement Bethel said, music in the Bahamas. It is in the areas of music and dance that we can see most clearly the connecting links with Africa and Europe. Ring dances and drunkard festivals obviously originated in Africa. Many folk songs and sea ballads are transplanted from Europe, and our quadrille dances, which is simply a fusion of the minuets and the foxtrots and the waltzes of Europeans, fused with the rhythm of the drums of Africa. Rex Nettleford defined it as such. He is a renowned Jamaican professor. He describes the music of the Caribbean as the rhythms of Africa and the melodies of Europe. And if you listen to any of our music, Emacs music, my music, Barabas's music, any music, you will see the melodies of Europe and the rhythms of Africa. The rhythms of Africa in the drum beat. That's a synthetic drum.
That's right.
I submit. Goat skin, and if you beat the goat skin drum,
Oh, definitely.
you get a different sound.
Oh, definitely. Oh.
Right?
Oh, yeah.
And why is that? The membrane of the hand and the membrane of the skin connects. That's God. The sound is different, and we are some of the few people in the world who beat drums with our hands.
No one else
On the
can do
skin,
it.
whether it's a goat skin, a cow skin, any kind of skin, membrane on membrane. And when you get into the cadence, Barabbas will tell you that Africans can perform for hours, non-stop, because of the vibration of the rhythm of the drum. The first sound you hear in your mother's belly is the heartbeat. Dum, 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 dum. That is the drum beat.
Oh, yes.
The drum beat stays within your vibratory system for 72 hours after you would have experienced the drum beat. You don't understand it, but that is your heritage. I was in church one Sunday a few years ago. There was a little boy, he couldn't have been 2 years old. And this was just when the Catholic Church allowed us to beat drums in the church. You know, before that you couldn't beat drums in the church. At the age of 15, I protested at the Aquinas College because they wouldn't allow us to beat drums in the church. We boycotted the service. Of course, I got behind torn up, but that's all right. But now you go into a Catholic church and you believe in a drummer church, especially when you go on Sunday morning when the drummers are there.
Yeah.
But this little boy was in the pew with his mother, and he was standing on top of the seat. And when he heard the drums, he started to do this. So his mother said, "Sit down." And he sat down for half a second. Then he jumped up again. He started to bounce again. She said, "I told you to sit down." I said, "Right behind." I said, "Leave that little boy." Sit down. She sat down again. The third time he got up, he ran in the middle of the floor.
There you go.
He couldn't help himself, people. The rhythm of the drum was in his soul. We were in New Orleans when a black journalist approached us and asked the question, what is drunkenness? He said, it's a celebration of life. This African woman who never heard this sound before looked at us and said, it's a resurrection of my spirit. Are you all hearing me? See, this drunkenness thing, with due respects to our previous speakers, have nothing to do with two parades on Bay Street.
Right. Amen.
This drunkenness thing takes us back to our original heritage. That is why the Africans celebrated that way. They put layers of clothing on themselves, covering all of themselves except for their eyes, because that represented the layers of their heritage of thousands of years of culture. And they performed, poking fun at the Europeans. You don't know, you can't control me. You may enslave me, but you can't control me. And they celebrate it. How many of you know that voodoo is a religion?
Yes, it is.
Obeah is a religion.
Yes, it is.
But the white Europeans will tell you that that's blasphemous. How many of you know that Imhotep was the father of medicine, not Hippocrates, as they try to tell you? Don't believe me? Go do your research.
Google it.
How many of you know that the alphabet was the creation of the Africans? How many of you would know that Pythagorean theory was stolen from the Africans?
The Moors.
And that Socrates and Plato and Aristotle were at the feet of the African sages. That's why they don't want to teach you about your history.
At the libraries, the book,
because you become entertained.
universities.
You become wise. And you would know that you are royalty.
Yes.
You would know that you are kings and queens and descendants of kings and queens. You would know that your history dates back more than 58,000 years ago in this part of the world. When you come off the coast of Bimini, you see the remains there. Go do it. Do the research yourself. Don't take my word. It's called Bimini Road. 56,000 years ago, the Africans were in this part of the world.
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
There's a book written by Ivan van Sertima. Ivan van Sertima, a Caribbean professor. They came before Columbus. Abu Bakari, a chief, a king, traversed these waters more than 100 years before Christopher Columbus.
Yes, sir.
And it was that information. How many of you know that in the 700s that the Moors taught the stupid Spaniards how to build the ships and teach them about navigation? Huh? Don't take my word for it. You're the Toastmasters, right?
Yes.
You're supposed to go and learn and research.
Yes.
Make me out a liar.
From Timbuktu.
Invite me back and tell me that I'm lying to you tonight.
No, sir.
They don't want you to know your history.
Too rich.
Because if you know your history, you wouldn't bend down.
Oh, definitely.
If you know your history, you won't sell your land to white-eyed, blue-eyed foreigners. Okay? If you know your history, you know about the Creole affair.
Yes, sir.
A ship traversing from South Carolina. Google it. Creole affair. Traveling from South Carolina to New Orleans. The ship was commandeered by the slaves. And they brought the ship to the Bahamas. Why did they do that? Because they knew if they got to Bahamian waters, they could be free. This is back in the 1800s, 1840 or something thereabouts. There was a slave on that ship. I think he was a Washington or Morris. When the ship got to Nassau, the freed Africans who were here, see, don't forget now, 1807, 1834. During that transitional period, what happened? The British Navy would commandeer those ships traversing these waters, and they would lease the cargo in their colonies. One of those colonies was the Bahamas. Many of the slaves who came from the West Coast. Some of them was set free in the Bahamas because the Bahamas was not the best place for growing things. So a lot of them were freed and left to do what they wanted to do. That's why Junkanoo has survived for more than 200 years.
Wow.
It's undiluted. You beat the drum the same way they beat it in West Africa. Quincy Jones did a research. Drummers come from the west coast of Africa. The singers come from South Africa. That's why you get Ladysmith, Mombasa, and all these, the harmonizing and all that. That came out of South Africa. But the drummers, that's a mandingo right there.
That's right.
That's a drummer.
Mandingo.
What am I saying? I see the light is red. The light is red, which means I got all I'm saying, know yourself. Yes, sir. Because your culture is you.
Yes, sir.
It's been diluted. Why? Because we have been influenced. You see our young men walking around. Look at son. Look how nicely he's dressed.
He's really nice, yes.
Young men with their pants downstairs, showing their stinking funky drawers. Huh? And they say that's hip.
No. You don't guys like that?
No, that's good. No. They don't like it. They don't know any better.
They look at
Because one came to my house. And when I saw him, I said, son, come inside. Who is your father? Give me his number. Because if you ever come to my house looking like this again, Toby, you come see my daughter, you ain't going back home. I can injure you. You've been warned. You're disrespecting my house and my daughter. I spend too much money to educate this child for you to come with your funky drawers, but you will take us somewhere.